On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks return to action on Monday evening against the Dallas Mavericks. Before we get to that game, a little bit of a mailbag on this Sunday evening, including the reality that the Hawks have actually been a little bit better on defense than offense in some respects this year. We'll get into that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1853 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here at the end of November. It's a holiday week here in the United States, and today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Your first purchase terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Overcast. Also on YouTube, please like this video as you're watching it, and please subscribe on both audio and video platforms to support the podcast. We had 5 episodes last week leading into this holiday week, and more to come during the holidays. The Hawks play a game on Monday that I'll cover in depth. On Wednesday, there's a big cup game on Friday. We don't slow down even with the holidays, so please stay tuned, and thank you for being here on the podcast today. It's a solo show going on today in between games. The Hawks do play a game as I'm recording this podcast tomorrow on Monday. But I have some mailbag questions that I want to answer later on in the show. And also I want to lead with a topic that's kind of a big picture one, but also one that I've been asked about a lot in recent days. So not really one question, but a topic necessarily. So I'm just going to say this, and then we'll dive into it. So far in 24-25 for the Hawks through 17 games, the offense has been a bigger issue for the team than the defense. Now, there's more nuance to that, but that would surprise people, I'm sure. I think number one on the narrative list this year, and it's for good reason, has been the Hawks' three-point defense. That has burned them a lot. Teams have shot the ball really well against them from three-point range. I'm not discounting that. That does matter. What I'm saying is the offense has been the bigger issue on the whole than the defense, and I'll tell you why in a second. So after 17 games, the Hawks are currently 23rd in the NBA as of this podcast on Sunday night in offensive efficiency at NBA.com. That is points scored per possession, which is the clearest metric of overall efficiency and effectiveness on offense. 23rd in the league. That's 8th worst in the NBA. They're a little bit better than that at Cleaning the Glass, which is a website that I talk about a lot. But Cleaning the Glass is this service. They actually take out garbage time. They take out some of the end of quarter heaves. It's a little bit more accurate in terms of like the actual imprint. So they're a little bit better on the margins than that. But still, the point stands. The Hawks are a below average offensive team. They're 18th or 23rd or something like that in the NBA this season through 17 games. And yes, the injury stuff is notable there. Bogey's played 4 games so far this year, and he's been awful in 3 of them. And he is clearly a top 3 offensive player on the team. So that's obviously a big factor. He's their best shooter, all those things. So being without him definitely hurts the offense. I'm not saying otherwise. DeAndre Hunter's offense has been missed as well. He's their 3rd best shooter on the team behind Bogey and Garrison Matthews. He's also missed 11 games so far. Then you had a stretch where they had no ball handling other than Trae and Keaton Wallace. That hurt them too offensively. I don't have to go through all that again, but it is fair to say that some of the offensive start needs injury context. But still, the theory of the case for this Hawks team this year, and really the whole Trae Young era, has been to be a playoff level team, they got to be either good or very good offensively, and then just good enough defensively. That was the same case this year. So far, the defensive stuff has actually happened. People haven't really noticed this yet. I'll get into a little bit more in a second, but defensively, they actually haven't been terrible. They're not where they were last year. They're not where they were 2 years ago. They were in the bottom 5 the last 2 seasons. They're not in the bottom 5 right now. They've improved defensively. But the offense has been the worst that it's been since Trae's 2nd season when they were still firmly rebuilding. That's pre-Bogey, pre-Gallo, when they won 20 games and missed the bubble. That's the season that last time the Hawks were this bad offensively so far. Atlanta has been a top 12 offense 4 consecutive seasons, and they were basically elite offensively anytime Trae was on the court, with very few exceptions in the last 4 years. Maybe with a little bit, sometimes with DeJounte, all that stuff. But anyway, generally speaking, Trae on, Trae available, good offense. Always been the case. So going down to 23rd or even 18th, it's not going to get it done for this team offensively to even be where they want to be, even be where they projected to be. Look, I'm fond of saying this. I'll talk about this at the very end of the podcast as well. The Hawks were not projected by anyone in the media, anyone nationally, anyone locally, to be more than a 500 team at the high end, basically. Maybe were there some high-end outcomes to be better than that? Yes, and they still exist, in my opinion. The Hawks could still win 44 games this year. Would not surprise me at all. But they were not projected to be there. And there's a reason for that. But with that said, one of the going down that far, even to get to that point, is going to be hard if they're not playing well on offense. And one of the dips this year has been turnover rate. I'll actually talk about that a little bit later on. I got a question about that later in the show, but is part of the problem is turnover rate this year. Not that it's been terrible, but it's been worse than it has in previous seasons. But the bigger issue so far this year is the shot making for the Hawks. They are 20th in the NBA in true shooting percentage, which is the most accurate way of chronicling shooting percentage overall. They're 21st in effective field goal percentage, which takes out free throws. Just talks about just the shots they're taking from the field, from 2 and from 3, 21st. They're 20th from three-point range. They're 19th in raw field goal percentage. They're 18th in two-point percentage. They're just below average as a shooting team so far this year in every way. Inside the arc, outside the arc, any way you slice it. Still, they're 4th in assists. Part of that is that Trae is the best passing guard in the league, in my opinion. But perhaps a big part of that is that they actually have to have assists or they don't score because they don't really have a lot of natural shot creation on this team individually. Trae has not been his usual self as a scorer this year, especially in the last 2 weeks. Jalen is not necessarily comfortable with that just yet. Most of the time as a lead scoring option. Risacher is still not really a self-creator offensively. Dice is not a natural scorer. You don't get a lot of self-created scoring options from center, et cetera, et cetera. Bogey's been missed. Hunter's been missed. All that stuff, throw it in there, and they've not been doing a lot of that. So you can get away with being a high assist team if you go back to the 2021 model of Trae plus a ton of shooting around him, but they don't have a ton of shooting, and that's not going to be happening this year necessarily. Right now, they have basically 2 guys on the roster besides Trae who are established high-level shooters, and it's Bogey and it's Garrison Matthews. And Garrison is like the 12th man because he's basically a specialist, and he's a great shooter. That's kind of all he is, broadly speaking. He's obviously better than that in some areas, but anyway. And then DeAndre Hunter is a proven shooter, but he's missed time this year like Bogey has, and he's not a great shooter. He's a good shooter. He's a has to be guarded out there shooter, not an elite shooter. So then you get into the 3 guys starting at the 2, 3, and 4 right now on a regular basis for the Hawks. Jalen at the 4, Risacher at the 3, Dice at the 2, are combining to shoot 30.3% from three-point range. You cannot have, in the modern NBA, your 2, 3, and 4 combined to shoot that from 3, especially when you have a non-shooting center, and the Hawks have 2 non-shooting centers, basically. Okongwu can shoot them, but he's not exactly going to be guarded out there. That's a really, really tough way to live, and it also makes life hard on guys like Trae and even like Jalen when you're driving into non-spaced floors. It's not just the shooting. It's when you don't have huge threats on offense to shoot the ball. Defenses can collapse on you. You run into walls. It makes life hard on your penetration, et cetera, et cetera. It all plays on each other. And positively, they've actually had a very strong shot profile this season, aka where they shoot the shots from. They're 7th in rim frequency. They're 8th in corner three-point rate this year. They're taking the fewest long twos of any team in the league, which is a good number. Cleaning the Glass has this stat called location effective field goal percentage, which basically is designed to project what an average team would shoot percentage-wise while taking the shots that they're taking now. Basically just simulating shot location and then saying, all right, this is what they should be shooting on those shots. The Hawks are 21st in actual percentage, and they're 10th in location percentage. So basically the Hawks are taking way better shots than they are actually making them at this point, which is a good sign. Does that mean that everything is perfect? No, because these are professional basketball players. People get sick of me talking about this. I understand it. I'm big on process, but in the end, you do have to just make the shots. So I'm not saying otherwise. They do have Bogey and Hunter coming back, and they're back now. That should actually help things. Risacher will only get better as a shooter. I believe that strongly. But the bones are better than the results, but they can be getting up more threes. Quinn said that a couple times already, even in the last couple days. But in general, offensively, they're not where they need to be. And I think the number one culprit for that is their shooting and lack of spacing. And that kind of makes it hard to drive as well. So that is a correctable thing. But it was one of the potential flaws of this roster this year was that they don't have enough shooting. Think about it this summer. I'm not making this up now. This is a topic that I broached multiple times this summer. They are 1 or 2 shooters short, and it's even more magnified without Bogey. Now that Bogey's back, that definitely helps, but he's not going to be able to change everything overnight for you. So guys got to make shots, et cetera, et cetera. I will do a defensive deep dive another time, but the same is kind of true there. The Hawks are currently 21st in defense. That is a notable improvement from the last 2 years. Like, notable improvement. They are much, much better defensively than they were the last couple of years. But they are still dead last and three-point defense in both accuracy and attempts. And so far, they're totally walling off the rim. That's a good sign. They are really, really, really good at protecting the rim at this point in time, both in percentage and in attempts. That's a great sign. They're at least doing something defensively to take away something. Last year, they were bad at the rim and they were bad from three because they were breaking down the perimeter all the time. This year, they're packing the paint, and that's been helpful, but you can't be this bad against the three-point shot. So on the bright side, they are 20th in location defensive percentage at cleaning the glass, which is great. Not great, but it's better than it is because they're 30th in the actual right now. So the same principle applies. The Hawks have been unlucky with their opponent shooting this year. They're still not great at opponent shooting in general, but they are better. So broadly speaking, I would say that games are not played on paper. I understand that. No one wants to hear the process stuff all the time. But the Hawks defense, in what they actually can control, has taken a real step forward so far. It's 17 games. It isn't a full season. They got a long way to go. It's about a 20% of the season so far. But they actually have improved defensively. It's been their offense regressing that has kind of brought some of the ceiling down so far this year. There is some hope, I think, on offense and on defense that things will kind of stabilize. But I strongly believe so far that the bigger issue, when you understand the context of this team, the way they've built it with Trae as the fulcrum and the best player, is that they have to be good on offense and okay on defense to be good. Right now, they're just kind of okay on offense or even below that. And they're better defensively than they were supposed to be for a lot of people. Well, I mean, not supposed to be that, but then they have been so far. And that's been encouraging to me, actually, despite the three-point shot. But they have to be better on offense. That's not up for debate. I get it. I also want to encourage everybody always to look at pace. It's not just about their raw point totals. You want to give more context than that. But one more time, I strongly believe the Hawks have been worse offensively so far with context than they have been defensively. And that's been their biggest issue through 17 games, broadly speaking. Okay. We'll have some mailbag questions coming up in a second. But first, though, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is sponsored by SKIMS. We all wear underwear every day, but I have to admit that I have not always thought about this kind of choices in that department a ton on a regular basis. I'm not alone in that. I'm sure people kind of make their own choices there and high priorities, low priorities, etc. But for those of you who have not heard yet, SKIMS now offers men's underwear, and I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely worth the hype. They have classic cotton essentials for everyday comfortable wear, and SKIMS also has stretch options. They're lightweight and never lose their shape, plus a SKIMS Sport collection of lightly compressive base layers engineered to sit seamlessly under workout clothes for maximum comfort and support. Whether you're a workout warrior or you just want to feel good every single day, which is obviously important, SKIMS has the options that you're looking for in their offerings. I can say right now that the reviews are absolutely fantastic for SKIMS. You'll be feeling great across the board when you check out SKIMS. Shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com/lockedonnba and let them know that we sent you to them. After you place your order, select podcast in a survey and select our show in the menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, SKIMS also just launched their biggest holiday shop ever, which is also available at skims.com/lockedonnba. One more time, check it all out at SKIMS. It's SKIMS, skims.com/lockedonnba. All right, our first question on today's podcast comes from John Nelson, who says, it seems obvious that Risacher should be playing more in the second halves of games. It's not like he's a defensive liability, and he's not turnover prone either. Is this just a trust issue? So for the numbers, this is true. He's playing less in the second half, 14.4 minutes per game in the first half, and 11.0 in the second half. So not a huge drop-off, but a real one, to be sure. I speculated in the past that I think the Hawks are keeping at least an eye on Risacher's minutes after a long summer and a long season last year, and he's still a rookie body-wise. He's still pretty skinny, etc., trying to get him stronger. So I buy that a little bit as the reason, but also this half-by-half thing could be a trust/rookie thing. I think Risacher is honestly just quite advanced with the way he plays as a rookie, defensively, the way he feels the game as a passer, etc., but he's still a rookie, and coaches tend to trust rookies a little bit less when they have comparable options, as the Hawks kind of do right now. Also, as I talked about, actually, I'll plug this now. I did a chat with my friend Glenn Willis of ATL and 29 on his Patreon this weekend and talked about this a little bit, where Quinn seems to be leaning into the young guys more early in the game and then pivoting toward the vets that he trusts into the games, because they're trying to do both right now at the same time. There's this huge counterfactual of like, are you trying to develop players or trying to win games? The Hawks trying to do both at the same time. Anyway, that could be part of this too. They still like starting him, which could have something to do with Hunter's knees, honestly, but they do like him in that role. I'm not sure he'll start every game the rest of the season. We'll see how that goes. I was surprised on Friday when they never brought him back in the game. He played like 5 minutes in the second half, which is not a lot, but it was strange. I didn't love that. Also, Risacher is doing this thing where he's much more aggressive offensively in the first quarter, and then after that, he stops being. So this year, he has a 24% usage rate in the first quarter, which is pretty high. After that, it's 20 in the second quarter, 18 in the third quarter, and 20 in the fourth quarter. So it's not crazy, but it's down noticeably from the first quarter. He's had a couple of big first quarters, more shot attempts, more aggressiveness, and then he kind of cools off. This could be noise too. Like, I think how they've played is notable here, but I think he should have played more a couple times in the second half of games. I'll be following this a little bit closely. Now that everybody's healthy, he might play less in general, which is not unreasonable, but he still want to play a lot because he's the number one pick in the draft. We want to invest in him. He's done a good job so far by rookie standards, etc. But as far as like what it is exactly, I don't have a great answer for you, but it's probably a combination of management and also just a little bit of the fact that they're trying to lead into veterans to win games at the end of games. Question from Austin, who says, first, thanks for posting on Blue Sky. I was hoping that you would eventually, when I got rid of Twitter, you said on there the Hawks turnover issues are not because of Trae Young and more because of what happens when he's not playing. Can you explain why that would be? It seems to me and other Hawks fans that Trae is the main culprit for the turnover problems. So first of all, yes, I'm on Blue Sky. It's bluesky.com/BT Rowland or whatever that's where I'm at. BT Rowland is the place to go on Blue Sky. I'll be quick here a little bit. I talked about this a few times on social media and on the podcast, but I teased it earlier in the show as well. But yes, the Hawks turnover issues are actually much bigger without Trae than they are with Trae. So hear me out here. The Hawks turnover rate as a team is up with Trae from previous seasons, but it's not because of Trae's individual turnover rate. It's actually about the same as it's been the last 4 or 5 years in a row. Trae's turnover rate is almost exactly the same. And by the way, yes, he is a high turnover player. Basically, the entire top 10 or 12 on the turnover list this year is star level players, and number one options have the ball in their hands a lot. It's Jokic, it's LeBron, it's Steph, it's Harden, De'Aaron Fox, Luka, Cade Cunningham, Domantas Sabonis, Victor Wembanyama, etc. So I get that he turns the ball over a lot. Look beyond that with me. Luka and Harden in previous stops are examples of this, but teams actually that play through one player heavily end up having pretty low turnover rates. The Hawks have been great at turnover rate the last few years with Trae, turning the ball over a lot individually because he's the only guy who's turned the ball over. That matters. Part of why the team turnover rate is up a little bit this year is that Jalen is actually in the top 15 this year in turnovers, which is a lot. He's leading the NBA in traveling violations right now, but there's still only about a 14% turnover rate with Trae on the court. For context, that's about league average. That's not where they want it to be. They want it to be better than that, but they're not awful with Trae on the court as far as turnover rate is concerned. The problem is when Trae sits, they are essentially the worst ball security team in the league. They have a 17.6% turnover rate when Trae is off the floor. It's not usually malicious, like it's usually like overpassing and being unselfish. And you'd rather have that. You want to be unselfish versus being selfish. But they have a hard time getting advantages with Trae off the court, with guys like Kobe and Dyson and Jalen getting it overextended with Trae off the court and turning it over. So long story short, yes, Trae is always going to have turnover issues individually because he's going to turn the ball over. He's a small guard. He gets blitzed. All those things are all fair. And I totally get people look at the turnover column, they go to the bottom, they see the guy who's turning the ball over most. I am telling you, team turnover rate is much more indicative of what's going on with a player on the court. And also, the turnover issues are really not with Trae. It's without Trae, which is not all on Kobe either or on Dyson or whatever. They don't have a lot of security as far as like who handles the ball with Trae off the floor. And because of that, they end up passing a lot and more passes. This actually seems kind of funny, but more passes equals more turnovers, generally speaking. There's a correlation there, not necessarily a straight line, but those are correlated together. And anyway, I will stop now on this, but there is no evidence of the numbers, and there hasn't been at any point in the last 5 years that Trae is a culprit for team turnover issues. It just doesn't exist. Not only this season again, but last 5 seasons in a row. This is not always simple with people. I get it. People want to talk about his individual numbers, and I totally understand that, but the numbers are the numbers over a large sample size. And when he plays, they're better taking care of the ball than when he does it. And I will at least say this, though. They do need to be better across the board with Trae on and off because they built this offense to be a team that controls the ball and wins on the turnover battle. And they've not been great there this year, but they have been better with Trae than without Trae. Okay, more to come on the podcast. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL and NBA action this season with FanDuel. FanDuel America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, get bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The app FanDuel Sportsbook is really easy to use. Gives you everything that you actually need to place your bets all in one place. And they have all stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads to money lines. They have player props, future bets, same-game parlays, live betting, game props, et cetera, all that at one place at FanDuel. And the app is safe and secure at FanDuel as well. They cover the entire range of sports. That includes the NBA, which we focus on heavily on this podcast, plus the NFL, college football, MLB, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, all kinds of leagues there, by the way. They have F1, NASCAR, in the auto racing space. They have boxing, MMA, and so much more. And that was an awesome time. Sign up with folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel. Place to go one more time is FanDuel.com and have $150 in bonus bets when you win that first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sport partner of the NFL. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. This is a podcast about basketball, but if you ever happen to see a hockey game live, it is an awesome experience. You have to actually have me tell you that. It brings a sensory experience to the table as well. It's amazing in person. At Game Time, you get tickets for all kinds of sporting events, including hockey, including basketball, football, baseball, etc. And you can also find tickets for music, comedy, and theater as well. They have an awesome feature at Game Time called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets even better and easier for you to have all of your favorite teams play live. They filter out all stuff you actually don't want and show you the incredible deals instead on great seats. So there's actually no time wasted with searches and searches and searches. For example, there are also deals right now involving Hawks games at Game Time, and that includes a pair of tickets for $19 each, including fees, for the game at home in Atlanta on December 2nd against the Pelicans. That's an awesome deal. Of course, more of that happening all the time at Game Time, and I love that feature at Game Time. That actually lets you turn on this feature that actually has that view of seats through all-in pricing, so there are no surprise fees at the end of the checkout process, plus the lowest possible price guaranteed at Game Time. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code It's Locked on NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use that code Locked on NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, and one more mailbag question before we sign off and talk about the Mavs game a little bit at the end of this process. A question from Shepard, who says, as a fan, I'm honestly just tired of being told every year that I should have low expectations for the Hawks. When is a fan allowed to have high expectations? The Braves have them every year, and nobody calls their fans crazy. I remember the Braves were a good team and still decided to reset because they had higher expectations for themselves. So first thing I would say here is that the Hawks and Braves are not analogous situations. There's no salary cap in baseball. There's a full minor league system in baseball. Teams are not as star reliant in baseball as they are in basketball. The playing field is not really level in baseball either. Like the teams that want to spend money, and the Braves are one of those teams. There's a long list of things there, but it is not apples to apples. Keep that in mind. And the Braves did go through a very painful rebuild to set this run up, and they did a reset that the question referenced, but they did a painful bad rebuild for a few years, and that hurt them. They came out of it. They spent money to change the GM, all those things. On the Hawks side, they did go through a rebuild. They were awful on purpose for a couple of years. They got Trae out of that. They missed some other decisions, let's say. Ownership decided to push the rebuild faster. That led to a perfect storm of the conference finals appearance, of course. That worked out, but nothing about the rebuild is without risk. Like, look at a team like Detroit. They've been awful for a long time, and they've been rebuilding the whole time. Sacramento rebuilt 4 times, and it just didn't work. So et cetera, et cetera. By the way, I had this podcast then. The entire rebuild, I hosted this podcast. I was very on board with the rebuild. It made sense. That team had run its course with, at the end of Paul Millsap's era, Dwight Howard came in, all that stuff. It was time to rebuild. They did that. So there you go. And quite frankly, if the Hawks had their own pick this year and in 2027, you might have seen a harder reset, and I might have argued for a harder reset. I'm not saying I would have, but you would have considered it a lot more a harder reset if they had their own pick, but they don't. So here's the biggest part of the answer. I like to be practical personally and understand circumstances and analyze things accordingly. Like, from the perspective of a Hawks fan, would it be great if they had expectations right now? Yeah, it can be fun to have expectations. It can also be perilous. Like, look no further than the last couple of seasons. So they make the conference finals in 2021. The next season, they fell short of expectations. Then they made the DeJounte trade, which is you could argue was a panic move. No matter what, it didn't work. It was a bad move in retrospect. And they, again, after making that move, had real expectations again, and they never got there again, which people got really angry about because everyone hates when you don't reach expectations. And there's too big of a topic talking about this right now on the show in depth, but I have many times said this before, and there's a friend of mine, Daniel LaRue of The Athletic, who says this. He uses the reference that ownership is the biggest competitive advantage in the NBA. And it goes both ways. Good ownership, good. Bad ownership, bad. And I'm not saying the Hawks have bad ownership, but the Hawks have below average ownership, I think, so far, in what we've seen so far from Ressler and company. They have shown no willingness to go above the tax in more than a decade. And that's not the only barometer. They've done some other stuff that actually has been good to invest in the G League, facilities. That stuff matters. But one is to spend on your NBA roster is the biggest thing that you can do. And the Hawks have made multiple cost-cutting, tax-ducking moves in the last 3 or 4 years that could have helped to not do those. They've also meddled in basketball operations, et cetera, so on and so on. Like, those are practical constraints. That doesn't make it fun, but when I'm trying to analyze the team, I do it in a realistic way. And the Hawks are probably not going to start suddenly spending like crazy and going into the luxury tax like Steve Ballmer might. Like, it'd be easier to build a contender in Atlanta if they were willing to spend. And maybe one day Tony will wake up and say, I'm willing to go into the luxury tax and big time in not just a little bit over, but like actually spend what you might need to spend to get there. But they're not there right now. Until they are, TBD. So I can't tell any fan how to actually feel. But with regard to this season, the expectations for this team were there for a reason. Like, they're in the middle of a retooling effort right now. Right now. That is part of why they are where they are and had relatively modest expectations this year. Like, they're clearly retooling the roster right now. They're not in a full rebuild, in part because they don't have their own picks. And they made a pretty disastrous trade for DeJounte Murray. Like, it did not work out. Not because he's a bad player, but because they overpaid for him in the first place, probably. And then he and Trae didn't work out together. They didn't win games. Part of that trade was to win now, and they didn't win. In fact, they got worse. So they began to get out of that this summer with a pivot. They traded DeJounte. They made what looks to be a very, very good trade, in my opinion. I liked it at the time. I like it even more now to get Dyson Daniels, who they love, and 2 first-round picks for DeJounte. But there's a reason why they were still projected by most people to win in the mid-30s games this year. In the betting market or whatever, they're not built to be a contender right now. So it does not, to me, it doesn't make sense to talk about them like they are. That's my practical approach of things. Like, I understand fans want to win. I don't blame you at all. I'm trying to cover the team the way that I think they should be realistically covered. And they're retooling. If 2 years from now, they enter the season with a team that should be good, I will tell you that they should be good. But this year, I was higher on them, and I had them for 500, basically, coming into the season. So I repeatedly described this summer a team that was, in a season that was much more about figuring out the future, information, learning about players, learning about Dyson, learning about Risacher, learning about Jalen, learning about Kobe, Okongwu, et cetera, than it was about the record. Like, they're still trying to win games. Quinn wants to win games. They're trying to win games right now, but they're not trying to win games in an all-in fashion. They're also trying to learn along the way. They just drafted Risacher. They love him. He's still a rookie. Like, it is what it is. They love Jalen. He's not been very good defensively this year, in my opinion. And also, he's still playing well, putting up numbers, and I think that extension looks awesome right now. I loved it when it happened. It looks even better now, in my opinion. Dyson was really bad on Friday, but before that, he's been awesome this year. That's a great, great, great guy to have on your roster long-term. You know what Trae is. Like, there's a big moment this summer that I've foreshadowed a few times where he either extends or you probably trade him. And we'll see one of those things is going to happen maybe a year from now. But he's the best player on the team. He's still pretty young. He's still really good. He might be hurt right now. He's still really good. There are questions, too. Like, the center spot long-term, I will probably do this as another question at some point pretty soon. I've been saying it since the summer. The Hawks are not married to Okongwu long-term. Maybe they will be. Maybe he'll break out, but he's not broken out yet. So if you don't believe in him, your long-term center is on the team. That's a big question. They are devoid of shooting right now. As I discussed earlier on this podcast, they are short on shooting. We don't know what Kobe's going to be. We don't know what even Risacher is going to be long-term. There are questions. That's all I'm saying. The big thing, though, is that I would personally recommend not riding the roller coaster too hard this season when it comes to results. I do understand this is going to fall on deaf ears. It's fine. Part of sports is being emotionally invested. I totally understand that. I am not emotional in the way that everybody else is. I am covering the team. I have watched the Hawks my entire life. I was a season ticket holder. I covered the team for 14 years. I'm not going to be on the roller coaster like some fans are, and that's totally fine. You can still be that way. But the Hawks being 7-10 right now instead of being 9-8 or 8-9 is not a crazy, crazy departure from where projections were supposed to be. And after the team made the conference finals, they came out and won 43 games the next year. That was legitimately disappointing, and they underachieved violently. Then they made the all-in trade for DeJounte, and they got worse. That was legitimately disappointing. They won 77 games in 2 years. That is really disappointing for a team that was actually actively making moves to try to win now. They made an all-in trade and got worse. That is the kind of thing that can make you crazy as a fan. I don't blame you at all for that. But the Hawks right now being 7-10 in a year that is definitely a retooling transition season, yeah, it's not great. They should probably be 8-9 or 9-8 right now, in my opinion. But they're 7-10. They're not 2-15. I will always admit, though, like, I'm an analyst. I don't think about stuff the same way the fans do. That's totally fine. And you can think about it any way you want to. But I got the question. I'm answering it. My job, in my opinion, is to give you the context and the nuance and the stats and the eye test and the observations and cover the team in holistic fashion. And people can draw whatever they want to from that and disagree with me. Look, I don't expect people to agree with me on everything. They shouldn't. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm right about. No, I'm going to be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. It is what it is. I've covered the team for 14 years. I'm wrong on plenty of things. They're right sometimes too. But I'll give you the whole picture. That's my job. And expectations are tough. Like, if you thought coming into the year the Hawks were going to be a 50-win team in your brain, yeah, 7-10 would be maddening. I think that the problem there, though, is that your projection was probably a little bit too rosy. But anyway, I would just remember one thing. I'll stop here. This is a year that I've been saying well before tip-off on opening night was a transition season for the Hawks. I think they're going to win more games than they lose the rest of the year. That's my guess. All that says is that I think they're going to be 40 and 42 or better. That might be too rosy still. And by the way, pending on Trae, if Trae's not his healthy self, it's going to be, I'm going to look bad there. No matter what, I think the Hawks are going to be decent this season. I've always thought that, but they're not going to be awesome. I don't think. Maybe they will be. I'll be wrong. We'll find out. But for now, I would just it's all about expectation management. I get it, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, last thing before we sign off. The Hawks play the Mavs on Monday evening, and it's a massive schedule advantage for the Hawks, actually. Atlanta had 2 days off after the long road trip, and Dallas played an overtime game on Sunday night in Miami. So it's a back-to-back for them. So no injury report, and also Luka is out, it seems like. He didn't play tonight. That's the projection. And they played a lot of minutes tonight in what became a loss. Kyrie played 39 or 40 minutes. Like, they extended themselves a lot. We'll see who plays and who doesn't or whatever, but it's an advantage for the Hawks on paper in that spot. Atlanta's injury report at the moment is clean. The only player listed on the injury report is Cody Zeller, who's not with the team, of course. Still have guys in the G League, etc. Seth Lindy's actually hurt. The Hawks, though, at this very moment are small favorites. They're like 1.5 point favorites. So we'll give this up right now at FanDuel in the game. That could change based on who's available for Dallas, but it's a winnable game for sure. Nothing is easy about this at all. I know Luka's out. So people are going to be like, oh, the Hawks should win for sure. The Mavs just beat the Nuggets without Luka and then took the Heat on the road to overtime. So, like, they're not a bad team without Luka. They have Kyrie as an offensive engine. They have a really good defense. They're top 5 in the league in defense or top 7 in the league in defense, whatever it is this year. Without Luka, they're better defensively. It's kind of like Trae in that respect, where their offense is worse, but defensively they actually get a little bit better probably without Luka. And Kyrie's awesome. So the Hawks are certainly use a home win. They have 2 tough games later on this week. They play the Cavs on the road on Wednesday, and then play the Cavs again at home on Friday in the Cup game. And at this moment, I believe Cleveland is still 16. Actually, they're about to be 17-1, it looks like. So, yeah, tough game. They're not as good as that number indicates, I don't think, but that's a tough matchup. And you're just hoping to split probably against Cleveland in 2 games. So winning on Monday would be very helpful, but we'll get into all of that later on. So I'll sign off now. Please subscribe to the podcast. Anywhere you find your podcast, please leave positive ratings, 5 stars, and reviews as well on Apple and on Spotify. Please subscribe on those platforms. Also, check us out on YouTube. Please like the show as you're watching it and subscribe on video and audio while telling your friends about the podcast. Also, I am on Twitter/X at BT Rowland. The show is there at Locked On Hawks, and I am also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and you can find my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'll be back after the game on Monday, and we'll see you all next time.